The crash and the mechanic. The ship tore through the atmosphere, trailing fire and debris as its failing system struggled against gravity's pull. Inside the cockpit, Tarak gripped the controls with her four-fingered hands, purple blood seeping through the makeshift bandage around her torso. Warning lights flashed across the console as the small craft plummeted toward the surface of the backwater planet. "Computer, status report," she hissed through clenched teeth, her silvery eyes narrowing as she fought to maintain consciousness. "Hull integrity at 27%. Life support failing. Engine core unstable," the emotionless voice responded. "Impact imminent in 43 seconds. Tarak cursed in her native tongue. The mission had gone terribly wrong. What should have been a simple elimination had turned into an ambush. Someone had betrayed her, and now she was bleeding out in a damaged ship about to crash on a primitive world at the edge of Imperial space. "Engage emergency protocols. Stealth field at maximum," she ordered, knowing it would drain the last of the power reserves but might prevent Imperial tracking systems from detecting her crash. If she survived, she'd need time to recover before they came hunting. The ship shuddered violently as it hit the tree canopy, branches and foliage scraping against the hull before it slammed into the ground, carving a deep furrow through the forest floor. Darkness claimed her. Dominic Reed was halfway through his second cup of coffee when the security sensors around his property chimed. Living alone in the wilderness of the new Appalachian territory had its advantages, privacy chief among them, but it also meant being vigilant about unexpected visitors, whether human or wildlife. He checked the monitor display, expecting to see a wandering bear or perhaps one of the genetically modified elk that sometimes migrated through the area. Instead, he saw smoke rising from the forest about 2 kilometers north of his cabin. "Well, that's not good," he muttered, already reaching for his jacket and emergency kit. Forest fires were no joke, especially this far from any official help. The rain had started by the time he reached the crash site, a blessing that would help contain any potential fire. Dominic approached cautiously, his hand resting on the blaster hidden beneath his jacket. 5 years living on the frontier hadn't dulled his instincts or his paranoia. What he found wasn't a meteorite as he'd half expected, but the unmistakable shape of a spacecraft, its design sleek and predatory despite the damage. Definitely not human-made. The craft bore no recognizable markings, but Dominic had spent enough time in space to recognize Imperial stealth technology when he saw it. "This day just keeps getting better," he said to himself, debating whether to turn around and pretend he'd never seen it. The Empire had no official presence on Earth, the planet was technically neutral territory, but harboring anything connected to them was asking for trouble. Common sense told him to walk away. Instead, he approached the shattered cockpit and peered inside. The alien was female, at least based on humanoid standards, slender build, delicate facial features, though these were marred by a network of ritual scarring that marked her as Vorelian. Her silvery skin had a faint luminescent quality, now dulled by injury and unconsciousness. A dark purple stain spread across her flight suit. Dominic had seen enough wounded soldiers to recognize someone clinging to life. "I'm definitely going to regret this," he muttered, carefully extracting her from the wreckage. She was lighter than she looked, her bone structure obviously different from human norm. The wound in her side had partially sealed itself, some kind of accelerated healing common to her species, perhaps, but she'd lost a lot of blood. A distant sound made him freeze. The distinctive hum of Imperial scout drones. They were already searching for her. Dominic made his decision quickly. He activated the emergency destruct sequence on the ship's computer, a universal design across most spacecraft, and retreated with the unconscious alien slung carefully over his shoulder. The resulting explosion would hopefully destroy enough evidence to buy them some time. Tarak awoke to unfamiliar surroundings, her assassin's training immediately kicking in as she assessed potential threats despite her weakened state. She was lying on a soft surface in what appeared to be a primitive dwelling. The air smelled of unfamiliar spices and some kind of burning organic material. Wood. She was on Earth then. Her mission briefing had mentioned the humans' peculiar attachment to archaic building materials. She tried to move and felt a sharp pain in her side. Looking down, she saw her wound had been cleaned and dressed with what looked like synthesized medical sealant, surprisingly advanced for this backwater world. "I wouldn't move too much if I were you," said a voice from across the room. "That wound tore through some important parts of whatever passes for your circulatory system." A human male stepped into view, tall and lean with dark hair streaked with premature gray. His face bore the weathered look of someone who spent significant time outdoors, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, belonged to someone with military training. "You're lucky I found you before the Imperial drones did," he continued, setting down a cup of steaming liquid nearby. "Though I suspect luck had nothing to do with it. That crash trajectory was controlled, you were aiming for the most remote area you could find." Turok's hand instinctively moved to where her disruptor would normally be holstered, finding nothing. "Looking for this?" The human held up her weapon, careful to keep his finger away from the trigger mechanism. "Beautiful piece of technology. Vorelian design, but with custom modifications. Not standard military issue." He set it down out of her reach. "Which makes you either a very well-equipped deserter or something the Empire wants back very badly." "You should have left me in the wreckage," Turok said, her voice raspy from disuse. "They will come for me, and they will not care what happens to you or this dwelling." The human smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "They're already here. Scout drones have been sweeping the area for 3 days while you've been unconscious. Fortunately, this cabin has certain modifications that make it difficult to detect life signs from outside." "Why help me?" Turok demanded, wincing as she pulled herself into a sitting position. "You know what I am." "I have a pretty good idea," he agreed. "The question is whether you're still that person or if crashing on this planet represents something else." Turok stared at him, puzzled by the human's cryptic words and even more by his apparent lack of fear. "My name is Dominic Reed," he offered, pushing the cup toward her. "It's water with electrolytes. Your system should be able to process it." "I am Turok," she replied after a moment of consideration. "Sixth Blade of the Vorelian Shadow Guild." She paused. "Former Sixth Blade." Dominic nodded as if this confirmed a suspicion. "The Empire doesn't let its assassins retire." "Which means you're running from something." "Not something. Someone." Turok accepted the water and took a cautious sip. It tasted strange but not unpleasant. "High Commander Vexcor. I was sent to eliminate a target, a human diplomat who has been rallying support against Imperial expansion. The intelligence was wrong. Imperial forces were waiting. It was a setup." "Vexcor," Dominic repeated, his expression darkening. "I know that name. He commanded the fleet that glassed the Centauri colonies." Turok watched the human carefully, noting how his hands clenched at the mention of the massacre. "You were there." "It wasn't a question." "I was a pilot," Dominic said simply. "One of the few who got civilians out before the bombardment began." He moved to a window, checking the perimeter sensors. "You should rest. When you're stronger, we need to move. This place won't stay hidden forever." As he turned to leave, Turok spoke again. "You didn't answer my question. Why help me?" Dominic paused at the doorway. "Because I've seen what the Empire does to worlds that resist them. And anyone Vexcor wants dead this badly might be worth keeping alive." Left alone, Turok settled back against the strange fibrous pillows, her mind racing with implications. The human, Dominic, was more than he appeared. A pilot who had witnessed Vexcor's atrocities firsthand and somehow escaped. Now he was harboring a wounded Vorelian assassin, making them both targets for Imperial retribution. For the first time since her escape, Turok allowed herself to consider the possibility of survival. Perhaps even something more. Hunted across worlds. "They found us." Dominic's voice cut through the pre-dawn silence as Turok finished her weapons check. 3 weeks of recovery had restored her to fighting condition, the superior regenerative abilities of her species accelerated by the strange herbal compounds Dominic had added to her food. "How many?" she asked, sliding her disruptor into its holster. "Dropship. Standard Imperial Tactical Squad, 12 soldiers. ETA 20 minutes. Dominic moved with practiced efficiency, gathering only essential supplies. "They're being careful, trying to avoid attention from Earth's monitoring systems." Turok nodded. "Vex Corps doesn't want official records of Imperial operations on neutral territory." "Which gives us an advantage," Dominic replied, pulling back a section of floor to reveal a hidden compartment. Inside lay weapons that no civilian should possess: pulse rifles, thermal detonators, and most surprisingly, an Imperial officer's sidearm. Turok raised an eyebrow at the collection. "You said you were a pilot." "I was many things." Dominic didn't elaborate further as he distributed the weapons between them. "The tunnel system leads to a bunker about half a kilometer east. I have a ship there." "A ship? On this primitive world?" Turok couldn't hide her surprise. Dominic allowed himself a brief smile. "Earth isn't as primitive as the Empire likes to believe. We just prefer they think that way." The tunnel was narrow and damp, forcing them to move in single file. Above them, faint vibrations signaled the arrival of the Imperial dropship. Turok felt a familiar tension coursing through her body, the heightened awareness that came before combat. "Why did you leave the Resistance?" she asked, needing to focus on something besides their pursuers. Dominic was silent for several steps. After Centauri, there wasn't much left to resist. The survivors scattered. Some tried to rebuild. Others, like me, decided to disappear. Yet you kept your weapons. Your ship. Let's just say I never entirely believed in the concept of retirement." They emerged into a larger chamber carved into natural rock. In its center sat a spacecraft unlike any Turok had seen before, sleek and predatory, but with design elements from at least 3 different species. "Modified Terran Mongoose-class courier," Dominic explained, activating the entry sequence. "Rebuilt with components salvaged from various Imperial vessels. She doesn't look like much, but she'll outrun any standard pursuit craft." The ship's interior was compact but efficiently designed. Dominic took the pilot's seat while Turok familiarized herself with the weapon systems. "They've found the cabin," Dominic announced, monitoring a small display showing the exterior cameras he'd hidden around his property. "Standard search pattern. We have minutes at most." The ship's engines hummed to life, remarkably quiet for their power output. As they prepared for launch, an explosion rocked the bunker. Proximity charges, Turok identified immediately. "They're sealing escape routes." "Hold on," Dominic warned, engaging the main thrusters. The ship shot forward through a concealed exit tunnel, emerging from the hillside just as Imperial troops breached the bunker behind them. The pursuing soldiers opened fire immediately, but the ship was already accelerating beyond their effective range. What should have been a clean escape, however, was complicated by the Imperial cruiser waiting in low orbit. "They brought serious backup," Dominic muttered, executing evasive maneuvers as the cruiser launched interceptors. "Vex Corps must want you badly." "Not just me," Turok replied, studying the tactical display. "They're deploying a capture configuration. He wants us both alive." Dominic's expression hardened. "That's not happening." The ship danced through the atmosphere, outpacing the first wave of interceptors before breaking into low orbit. The Imperial cruiser loomed ahead, its weapons systems coming online. "We can't outrun a capital ship," Turok said, calculating their diminishing options. "We don't need to outrun it." Dominic's hands flew across the controls. "We just need to outthink it." He executed a series of maneuvers that brought them dangerously close to the cruiser's hull, using the larger ship's mass to shield them from its own weapon systems. It was flying that bordered on suicidal, the kind only possible from someone intimately familiar with Imperial tactical protocols. "You weren't just any pilot," Turok realized, watching Dominic navigate with impossible precision. You flew against these ships. With them, actually, Dominic corrected, dodging between communication arrays as point defense weapons tried and failed to target them. Before I saw what they really stood for. A sudden understanding clicked into place. You were Imperial Military. Special Tactical Division. Infiltrated the Resistance to identify key leaders. His voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. Until I was ordered to provide coordinates for the Centauri civilian shelters. The implications hung between them as Dominic guided the ship toward a blind spot near the cruiser's engine section. You defected, Turok said. I chose humanity, theirs and my own. Dominic activated a sequence on the ship's computer. Like you chose to run rather than continue being Vexcor's weapon. The comparison struck uncomfortably close to truth. Before Turok could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. They've locked tractor beams, she reported, checking the tactical display. Dominic smiled, a cold expression that transformed his features. Exactly as expected. He pressed a final command sequence. Remember those thermal detonators we brought? I left a few souvenirs in the bunker, configured to transmit on Imperial security frequencies. On the display, they watched as multiple explosions erupted across the cruiser's ventral section, precisely where security teams would route captured communications from a prisoner transport beam. You turned their own protocols against them, Turok said with newfound respect. The tractor beam faltered as the cruiser's systems rerouted emergency power. In that moment, Dominic engaged the ship's hyperdrive, a dangerous maneuver this close to planetary gravity, but their only chance at escape. Stars stretched into lines around them as they broke free. Where are we going? Turok asked once they were safely in hyperspace. The outer reach. I have contacts there, other deserters, resistance fragments. Dominic set the autopilot and turned to face her. People who would be very interested in what you know about Vexcor's operations. Turok considered this. She had been running without purpose, focused only on survival. You're suggesting we fight back. I'm suggesting we do what both of us were trained for. Dominic's eyes held a determination she recognized. We hit them where it hurts, and we make Vexcor pay for Centauri, for your betrayal, for all of it. Two fugitives against the might of the Empire. Turok said, but there was no dismissal in her tone, only tactical assessment. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one the enemy created themselves. Dominic held her gaze. An Imperial deserter and a Vorelian assassin. We know their tactics, their weaknesses, their arrogance. For the first time since her mission had gone wrong, Turok felt something beyond survival instinct. Purpose. Perhaps even hope. Then we hunt, she agreed, her silvery eyes reflecting the streaking stars of hyperspace. And Vexcor becomes the hunted. The ship carried them deeper into the darkness between stars, two unlikely allies bound by their broken pasts and the promise of retribution. The Empire had created them both, trained them to be weapons, never imagining they might one day turn against their makers. That mistake would cost them dearly.